The Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse magically appeared on your Super NES back in 1992. Developed and published by Capcom, Magical Quest was one of the last in a line of Capcom-developed Disney games that included all-time classics like DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers, and Darkwing Duck, among others. And while Capcom had seen considerable success on the NES with its Disney games, it had yet to release anything using the license on the Super NES nearly 2 years after it had already been on store shelves. But Capcom would finally end that drought when they saw fit to grace the Super NES with Magical Quest in late 1992. And even though it was just a game starring Mickey and his buddies, the early previews of it at least made it look like a gorgeous game that was maybe taking more than a bit of inspiration from the excellent World of Illusion for the Sega Genesis, with its focus on using magic throughout the game. But was it a return to form for everyone waiting patiently for their Capcom Disney gaming fix? Or was Capcom just tossing out something to make a few bucks while other developers were giving much more lucrative Disney movie licenses? Well, grab your favorite wand and robe, because we're about to see if Magical Quest is worth conjuring up. Start up Magical Quest and you get a plot that would make even the youngest of kids playing it roll their eyes in boredom. Essentially, Mickey, Goofy, and Pluto are all out playing catch when for some reason Goofy launches the ball as hard as he can, sending Pluto on a mad dash after it. Apparently no one was able to see where Pluto ran off to, so Goofy initially goes to find him. But Mickey quickly realizes that Goofy probably isn't the best option for such things. Mickey then takes it upon himself to be the smarter, more responsible person to find Pluto, only to immediately plunge off of a cliff. Somehow by doing this, Mickey ends up in a magical land with no real explanation as to how or why. And while you can always insert your own dark storyline about how Mickey actually died when he fell off that cliff and is now in some surreal afterlife, you'd probably be doing your sanity more of a favor by pressing start to get this magical train rolling. Taking control of Mickey may at first seem like you've entered yet another mascot platform game where the most advanced technique to master are jumping on top of enemies and across platforms. And while you can definitely do those things, Magical Quest does throw in a few interesting mechanics to break up the colorful monotony. First off, while Mickey is totally comfortable murdering enemies with just his butt, he can also grab blocks that are hanging around the level, tossing them at enemies whenever you let them go. If you ever played Rescue Rangers on the NES, then you'll feel right at home doing this in Magical Quest as well. Mickey can also grab other things hanging around the levels like gold blocks that spit out bonus items, using fruit as a helicopter to reach higher areas, or even picking up and tossing smaller enemies once they're dazed. And while it's pretty fun to pick up and throw things with wild abandon, this whole idea is kind of thrown out the window once the game starts introducing special costumes in Stage 2. Essentially, these costumes can be changed into at any time and give Mickey a whole new set of attacks and abilities that his normal self can't use. For instance, your first costume will be a magician's outfit that allows Mickey to charge up and shoot magical blasts, which is definitely helpful when dealing with enemies that Mickey can't assault up close with his ass. Using these costume abilities will ultimately drain your magic power though, which can only be refilled by finding power-ups around each stage. If you run out of magic power, then you may as well switch back to normal Mickey, as most of the costumes don't do much without it, and also doesn't allow for Mickey to grab and throw things either, unless you're using the Mountaineer costume. As you'd expect from a game that gives you new abilities as the game progresses, each new stage generally has a focus on using your newly found outfits, like putting out fires and moving blocks around with your fireman costume, or scaling mountains and grabbing onto platforms Captain Commando style using the Mountaineer costume. Each new costume feels completely different from the last, and mastering them is actually pretty fun, and gives the game some solid variety where it would otherwise just be another mascot platform game. Sadly though, even with all of this stage and costume variety, Magical Quest isn't really challenging or long enough to let you use them as much as you'd want to. The game is only 6 levels long, with the first 4 mainly focusing on using the costumes that the game introduces in each of those stages. In fact, only the 6th and final stage actually gives you a level that seems to push you into using multiple costumes to make it to the end. So if you were expecting the game to give you more chances to experiment with the whole costume thing, then you'll probably be disappointed, as most levels seem to push you into using only one specific costume. Bosses continue that trend, with most of them dependent on using the costume you found in that stage to defeat them, though a few do allow you to switch things up a bit if you want to. But doing so will probably only make things more challenging if you stray away from what the game actually wants you to use. And if you're expecting Magical Quest to offer up a hefty challenge that would maybe offset the game's short length, then you should probably temper those expectations before jumping in. Even at its hardest difficulty setting, Magical Quest probably won't take you more than a couple hours to beat, especially with with the infinite continues and generous checkpoints it gives you to do so with. And with no real reason to play through again besides trying a harder difficulty level, if you didn't already start at the hardest difficulty level, then you'll probably be left wondering where the second half of the game magically vanished to. By the time Magical Quest released, I'd kinda moved on from the hardcore Disney fan I was back in the NES days. But it still didn't stop me from picking it up as soon as I saw it on my video store shelf. At the very least, you could generally always depend on Capcom Disney games to offer up some solid gameplay, and Magical Quest definitely has a fun take on your standard platform game, even if the whole costume thing isn't used as much as it could have been, and the difficulty is a bit on the way too easy side of things. Personally, I never really cared as a kid that the game wasn't very long or challenging, simply because I usually only had a few days to play it until I had to return it to the video store. So any game I could completely beat in a short period of time kinda made me feel like I got my money's worth. Though I could definitely see some buyer's remorse if someone had paid a full $60 for Magical Quest back in the day, expecting more than just a couple hours of gameplay before the credits roll. Despite the negatives though, Magical Quest is still an enjoyable game for anyone that's a fan of Capcom developed Disney games, especially if you go in expecting a great looking stress-free game featuring Mickey and his friends. And if you can manage that, then I guarantee that you'll wish this Magical Quest had materialized in front of you sooner.